Hello everyone, welcome to my walkthrough of the Harley Quinn story pack for Batman Arkham Knight with no damage, no combo loss, and no restarts, which was something I completely forgot to mention about my Red Hood DLC video. I managed to do it without restarting, which I forgot to specify, but I'm trying to do this same restriction for every single DLC. I mean, minus Catwoman's Revenge, of course, because that DLC doesn't deserve any respect at all, given how fucking broken it is. But I'll save that for another video. But we're playing as Harley Quinn in this prequel to Batman Arkham Knight, and she is infiltrating the Bloodhaven Police Department in order to free Ivy, which we all know Ivy did not join Scarecrow in the end, so this doesn't really serve much of a purpose, but they just wanted to do something with Harley Quinn. But the execution is very flawed. Compared to the Red Hood story pack, this DLC is nowhere near as good, because Harley Quinn is very limited in her capabilities in both combat and Predator. So in combat, she is very limited in the sense that she only has to work with the snare trap and the jack-in-the-box for combat. The laughing gas is more so like the smoke pellet for actually serving a purpose in the Predator encounters. But Harley Quinn doesn't have the ability to do critical beatdowns on enemies, and she is very slow, and she has a lot of the same flashy animations as Catwoman, and Catwoman is my least favorite character in all of the Arkham games, given how limited her capabilities are, and with how flashy she is, and with how slow her animations are, and Harley Quinn captures that a bit. And in the Predator sequences, Harley, and we know her personality very well, does not try to do silent takedowns. She will always do loud takedowns. So anytime you're trying to initiate a loud takedown, you are causing the enemies to go on random paths. However, this beginning to this Predator encounter, I found that it is very easy to get a consistent strategy to get rid of these three enemies right here. So take out those two enemies with loud takedowns, and then use your snare traps to ensnare this guy, and then do a loud takedown on him. You have to wait a second after he gets ensnared by the snare trap, because the detection on the takedown only appears after a certain amount of time when he's ensnared. And when that's done, you need to navigate your way over to this room right over here, and plant a jack-in-the-box. Hopefully there aren't any police officers in this room, and hopefully there aren't any police officers patrolling near this room. But you need to use your jack-in-the-box right there to lure 2 or 3 of these police officers over here. However, don't detonate it, because what I'm trying to do right here is I'm hoping if I don't detonate it, then most likely the enemies are going to investigate the enemies that I've just taken out, and they'll be right near the explosive trap, and I'll be able to detonate it. I mean, this was a theory I was testing out, but it's not that effective, I think. But I guess I'm wrong right over here, because these enemies, a lot of them are just coming into this room to investigate the 2 enemies that I've taken out. And I guess it's another good thing as well about not using the explosive trap immediately. If you get 2 enemies right next to the jack-in-the-box, you're most likely going to be able to use a double takedown on them. And now I'm going to detonate the explosive trap right here and take out these 2 enemies. It's an interesting exploit, the explosive trap, because the enemies, they do adapt to it, but when they're busy trying to investigate bodies, if you place an explosive trap in their path, they're very slow to react to it, and they're constantly saying, oh, get original, Quinn, I'm not going to fall for that, but technically they are falling for it if you place the explosive trap in between themselves and the body. So this is what's allowing me to effectively exploit the situation to my advantage to be able to take out most of these enemies. And I'm once again repeating the same method of making noise by doing a loud takedown, luring a couple of enemies near the trap, and then I'll be able to detonate it and clear them out. But again, it's all up to what the AI chooses to do. But you notice right here how this guy on the left isn't trying to shoot the trap? This is what I mean when I say the enemies are so delayed when actually trying to shoot the trap, even though they've adapted to it, if they're busy doing some other action. This is important to note when trying to do these Predator encounters. There's 2 Predator encounters, but this one's the hardest. It's this Predator encounter that was causing me so much trouble, and I was stuck on this DLC for at least an hour trying to figure it out to actually satisfy the restrictions I put upon myself. And compared to the Red Hood DLC, which took no time at all, this DLC took so long to do. but at least I finally managed to get something in the end. But we're moving on to another combat encounter. This time there's a guy with a shield. So you want to make sure that you immediately do the aerial attack on him when you're given the chance. And when you go into the aerial attack animation, when you do it on a shield guy, none of the enemies will attack you. And also, I forgot to mention, Harley Quinn has access to a special mode called Mayhem Mode. And you fill up the bar by doing takedowns. And interestingly, you can actually fill that bar in Predator encounters because, of course, the only way you're going to be taking out the enemies is via takedowns. And in the combat, you need to fill it up by using special takedowns and ground finishes. And Harley Quinn is pretty limited in their capabilities, so just to speed it up, I'm just going to use a Mayhem Mode, but I'm only going to use it when there are at least 4 or 5 enemies left, because in the time I'm able to do one Mayhem Mode, I can eliminate 4 of the enemies. And then the rest are just cannon fodder. Very simple. And now we're going to move on to the next Predator encounter, which is very simple, and I managed to just figure it out on accident, because there's not as many enemies this time, and the game is introducing you to this mechanic where you can agitate plants, and they will actually eat police officers, but I only used it once, because I didn't find any need to use the rest of them, and just wasting time trying to use that mechanic. It would have taken quite a while to get the Predator encounter done. But then we have a boss fight against Nightwing, which is a pretty stupid boss fight because you just treat Nightwing like he's a stun rod guy and just jump over him, and that's really it. So I'm just going to explain my thoughts on the DLCs. I mean, I mentioned that the Red Hood DLC was my favorite, not because it has any relevance to the story, but because the gameplay is so much fun, and Jason is such a fun side character to play as, and I just like his personality. I just like the gadgets he has. I just like that he has a lot of the capabilities provided by Batman Arkham Knight's combat system. But then we go to a DLC like this with Harley Quinn, and Harley Quinn is so inferior in combat and also in the Predator sequences. There's just no way to actually make them a lot more interesting when you're provided such limited capabilities. And this is supposed to tie into the main story in the sense that this takes place before the events of Batman Arkham Knight, but it's all for nothing because Ivy ends up betraying Scarecrow anyway, so why are they showing this? I feel like they only did it just to showcase that, oh, we have a lot of content, play our game. And I just feel like that's the case with a lot of the DLCs, like really all of them for that matter, aside from the Red Hood DLC, which it doesn't have to connect to the main story because playing as the Red Hood and doing those Predator encounters and also the combat encounters, they're a lot of fun. But with the other ones, they're just kind of average at best. And they don't tie in that well to the main story. They don't really try to build upon points that were established at the end of Batman Arkham Knight. And they feel very disconnected in a lot of ways. And, a lot of people were very disappointed with the DLCs for Batman Arkham Knight because they could have been substituted for challenge maps, in all honesty, where you're just playing as these characters. I mean, they kind of accomplished this with Batman Arkham Origins because you were playing as Deathstroke in the challenge maps, and you were also playing as Bruce Wayne in the challenge maps. And they didn't try to classify those DLCs as story DLCs, but here they're doing that, but they're classifying them as story DLCs. They don't deliver much when it comes to interesting content. Just the scenarios that they put you in are kind of average and really silly too, like when they reduce Nightwing to being nothing, when they make it where Black Mask can take so many hits from guns before he actually goes down, and it's just a format that they've used from Two-Face's boss fight from Arkham City, only this time it's an actual fight. And then the rest of the DLCs just involve simple combat encounters and Predator encounters. And then we have Catwoman's Revenge, which I'm not going to include in that bunch because it's a shitty piece of content, where the developers clearly demonstrated that they don't care about what they're putting into these DLCs. They don't care about actually tying into the story properly. They don't care about actual balance. They don't care about their own designs that they actually put in place with the game. And so they therefore decided to make those feelings known with a shitty piece of content that is honestly one of the worst DLCs I have ever played, objectively, because the Catwoman's Revenge DLC is fundamentally broken on so many levels. Now, I'm not going to stop reiterating on this point, but I'm not going to do the same restrictions for Catwoman's Revenge when I get to that DLC, because that DLC does not deserve any kind of respect at all. Like, I'm only doing these kind of restrictions for Harley Quinn's DLC because it's at least average at best and somewhat decent, and it doesn't try to put in anti-free flow elements into free flow combat. And the Predator encounters are somewhat interesting, but Catwoman's Revenge, like the first Predator encounter is fine, but then the final encounter with the Riddler robots is one of the worst, or not one of the worst, it is the worst encounter ever made in the entire Arkham series by far. I've played Poison Ivy's boss fight, I've done Bane's boss fight, I've done that pump access room area from Batman Arkham Asylum, and those feel way better than that combat encounter in Catwoman's Revenge. What the fuck were the developers thinking? And why didn't they do more with their DLCs? They just made them very throwaway DLCs. Even the Red Hood DLC, as much as I like it, feels like a throwaway piece of content because it could have been substituted for a challenge map, in all honesty. Like, this game was demanding so much better content, but they just didn't deliver in the slightest, and so much of the fan base agrees with me on that. But that is the end of Harley Quinn's story pack. And here's one blooper where, for some reason, Harley Quinn did not bother trying to punch this guy when he was charging, because that's just a fundamental problem with the charge attack animation that the enemies do, where you're only allowed to use some kind of L2 ability in order to stop the guy from charging. You can't use anything else because the game doesn't read your hitbox correctly, and it's just very odd that way. And that's why I got tackled just then. And that concludes this video. Stay tuned for the other DLCs. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.